On a stormy night, I caught Simon and his first love going to a hotel. He was not flustered at all and even thoughtfully arranged for the driver to take me home. Suddenly, I felt this marriage was meaningless. I asked his driver, "Wanna do it?" In the year we've been married, this is the third time I've caught Simon and Maria being ambiguous. He always said he saw Maria as a sister, but I've never seen a brother who would get a hotel room with his sister. And so blatantly, I didn't see a trace of panic in Simon's eyes. He even thoughtfully said, "It's raining heavily outside. I'll have the driver take you home." He didn't ask why I was there, nor did he explain why he and Maria were there together. He was so distant and polite, like we were just friends, not husband and wife. I stared at him for a few seconds, dazed. Suddenly, this marriage felt pointless. So I didn't cry or argue, just nodded calmly. Simon pointed outside casually. "My car is over there." "Okay." I followed his direction and got into a black car. The driver in the front seat turned around. Our eyes met, and I froze for a moment, because I didn't know him. But a couple of days ago, I heard Simon on the phone saying he would change drivers. This must be the new driver. He looked quite handsome, sharp brows and bright eyes. His hands on the steering wheel were slender yet powerful. Simon is really open-minded, hiring someone so handsome, not afraid of overshadowing himself looking like a pig. Thinking of this, I lowered my head and smiled. The driver in the front was puzzled. "What are you laughing at?" I looked up and asked the boldest question in my life. "Wanna do it?" Simon would never imagine that I would be with his driver, getting a room upstairs. The thrill of betrayal made me extremely sensitive. I felt like I was in hot water, unable to escape. I could only follow the driver's rhythm, rising and falling, sinking and drowning. In the latter half of the night, I woke up thirsty. Instinctively, I turned over to get up for water, and was pulled into a firm embrace. "What's wrong?" a slightly hoarse voice from just waking up asked above my head. I froze, then remembered, I wasn't alone tonight. But Simon's driver was so bold. He didn't leave immediately after. He stayed and slept with me. Simon was downstairs. What if we met in the morning? How would he explain? Didn't he care about his job? I gently pushed him away, sat up, and turned on the light. He sat up too, lazily and freely. There was no tension of having an affair with the boss's wife. Instead, I felt a little awkward, lowered my head, and said, "You should go." "What?" He couldn't believe it. "You want me to leave?" "What else?" It was just a moment of impulse. "Do you want to cling on?" I reminded him. "After all, Simon is your boss." He snickered, opened his mouth as if to say something, but swallowed it back. He turned and took a bottle of water, drank more than half. When he saw me staring, he handed it over. I didn't take it. He smirked, a roguish smile. "We've kissed. What's the big deal about drinking from the same bottle? Drink up, or I fear your throat will be sore from all the screaming later." At first, I didn't get what he meant, until he pressed down, taking all my breath, dragging me back into the whirlpool of desire. The next morning, when I woke up, he was finally gone. That absurd night had finally passed. I got up, washed, and took the elevator down, only to run into Simon and Maria. They were hugging as they entered. The moment they saw me, they were a bit surprised, but their responses were completely different. Simon asked me, "What are you doing here?" Maria said, "Don't get the wrong idea." I felt a little dizzy, so Simon held me up. Holding her hand wouldn't do. Had to be her waist, but I just glanced and didn't bother asking more. Instead, Simon was very persistent, wanting to know why I was there. He asked again, "Didn't I have the driver take you home last night?" I didn't want to go home. "You can stay in a hotel. Why can't I?" "Simon, you stayed in a hotel alone." When he asked this, his gaze was like a knife, scanning me up and down. Seemed like he completely forgot he was still holding Maria. I sneered, ready to retort. At that moment, the elevator reached the first floor, and with a ding, the metal doors opened. I instinctively looked out, and was stunned to see the person standing outside. It was Simon's driver. He had changed clothes and styled his hair. If I didn't know his identity, at first glance, I would think his high-class look meant he was somebody important. But he left. Why did he come back? Seeing Simon and Maria had no luggage for him to carry back, he must not be returning for them. Could it be he came back for me? In front of Simon, so audacious, I felt like I could hardly breathe. And what suffocated me more was Simon's eager smile, respectfully addressing the driver, "James." He wasn't Simon's driver. He was a James. Someone Simon had to bow and show respect to. Last night he came to the hotel to pick up a friend. Simon's car just happened to be parked nearby. They were both black. I didn't check closely and got into the wrong car. Then that whole night of absurdity happened, making me want to disappear on the spot. Simon rare had a chance to talk to James, so he naturally wanted to seize the opportunity. He asked if James would join him for a meal. James glanced at me. Somehow, I felt in that look a silent invitation for me to join. Of course, I wouldn't go. Not with Simon and Maria's nauseating closeness. Who would sit and eat with a one-night stand and husband, especially since James clearly had ulterior motives? I quickly said, I have something to do. I'll head back. Simon hadn't asked why I was at the hotel yet. He looked a bit upset, but this was nothing compared to having dinner with James. So he didn't push further. He just gave me a look, signaling me to leave quickly. Standing beside him, Maria looked shy and demure, but her eyes were full of smugness. It was as if she was silently challenging me. So what if you're the legal wife? I'm here with him, walking side by side with him. Before, I probably wouldn't have bothered with these two. I always thought that spending too much energy on trashy people would just ruin my mood. But today, with James watching, I felt a strange competitiveness rising in me. I stopped walking and smiled. Things at home aren't that urgent. It's dinner time anyway. Why don't I join you all for dinner before heading back? Simon's face turned black immediately. James and I are talking business. You wouldn't understand. Go home now. What about Maria? I remember Maria doesn't work either. If I don't understand, does she? Simon was taken aback by my sharpness. He probably didn't expect me to be this blunt suddenly. James, after hearing my words, gave Simon and Maria a playful look. They might act shamelessly in front of me, but they had to keep up appearances in front of someone like James. Maria, in particular, turned red and hurriedly explained, Sis, I told you earlier. Simon was just holding me because I wasn't feeling well. It's not what you think. What do I think then? Do you know what's on my mind? Maria opened her mouth but couldn't answer. She turned to Simon for help. Simon, embarrassed by James' presence, couldn't argue with me, just glared at me angrily. I continued to smile and looked at James. He smiled back, with a more playful glint in his eyes. Slowly, he said, Since we're all here by chance, Simon should bring Simon's wife and Maria along. He paused deliberately. I almost suspected he wanted to say, bring Simon's wife and mistress along, but perhaps he didn't want to lower himself, so he kept it subtle. This meal was destined to be neither peaceful nor pleasant. I didn't expect Maria to have such sharp eyes. I had carefully covered up all of James' marks on me from last night, but she still noticed a red mark through a gap. Later, while I went to the restroom, she quietly followed me. While I was washing my hands, she deliberately splashed water on me, soaking my clothes. Sorry, I didn't mean to. Let me wipe that for you, she shouted loudly, but her hands didn't seem to be wiping off the water. Instead, she kept trying to pull my clothes apart. She then feigned shock and screamed, Oh my gosh, what happened here? Why is it all red? I realized her intention and quickly pushed her away, holding onto my clothes. Maria saw this and dropped the act. She leaned in, her face twisted with a smirk, and asked, Simon was with me last night. How did you get those marks? What's it to you? I responded, nothing to me, but if Simon or your parents find out, what do you think will happen to you? Maria said, blinking at me. I felt a chill down my spine. It was then that I truly realized how much Simon's first love had affected him. Simon had shared everything about our marriage and family situation with Maria. That's why Maria could threaten me like that. She knew that even if Simon cheated first, given our family situation, and my parents' stubborn traditional views, if they found out about last night, they would kick me out without hesitation, even cut ties with me. They believed that all men strayed, as long as he was willing to change. A prodigal turning back was still a good husband. But I found such a marriage meaningless. I didn't want to suffer for a lifetime. Last night's adventure with James might have been impulsive, but I didn't regret it. I just didn't want it to become public knowledge. Wouldn't that give you what you want? I said to Maria. Have Simon ask me for a divorce. Do you think Simon doesn't want to divorce you? You're the one holding on. Maria replied. Did Simon tell you that? I asked. What else could it be? In fact, I had already asked Simon for a divorce. The first time I caught him flirting with Maria, I asked if he wanted a divorce. I was willing to give him and Maria a chance. After all, ours was just a business marriage. But that was only a month after our wedding, and both families' businesses were stable. Simon didn't dare ask for a divorce, fearing the fallout. The second time I caught him and Maria was about 6 months into our marriage. By then, my family's finances were a bit troubled. Simon grew bolder. He wanted a divorce too, but didn't want to split any post-marriage assets with me. So, he said nothing, trying to force me to make the first move and compromise. But I wasn't an idiot. The second time, I didn't give in. What's more ridiculous is, even though I had mentioned divorce to Simon, he told Maria I was the one clinging to him. Rest assured, I said to Maria, as long as Simon is willing to divorce, I'll step aside for you too. Just you wait, Maria snapped. When I returned to our table, James and Maria were already gone. Only Simon remained, looking as dark as a storm cloud. I couldn't understand why he was so angry. Without love between us, we should just get a divorce. He could be open and honest about being with Maria. Give his first love a legitimate status. Wouldn't that be great? I asked Simon, do you want a divorce? Simon, you want a divorce, don't you? Can't wait to jump into another man's arms. I'm not exactly rushing it, am I? You've been with Maria all year. You know that very well. From where I stand, you seem more desperate than I am. Simon got so infuriated by my words that he jumped up. In his haste, he knocked over the water glass on the table. The waiter heard the commotion and rushed over. While righting the glass, he asked Simon if he was okay. After all, it's a high-end restaurant. If a customer were to get hurt, they'd be liable. Simon didn't even acknowledge the waiter, gave me a fierce glare, then turned and left. I quietly watched his back, then looked at the slowly spreading clear liquid on the table. It was like our tasteless marriage. Simon seemed to forget that he had once promised me, after marriage, we would make a good life together. He said affection could be cultivated. He said that even if there wasn't love, there would be familial affection, and that was more reliable between people. He said he wouldn't betray me. If he fell for someone else, he'd be honest about it. I believed his lies. That's why he made a fool out of me. Simon told both our parents about my situation. As I expected, my parents had a strong reaction. First, they scolded me, then demanded that I apologize to Simon. I thought I misheard. You guys want me to apologize to Simon? What else? Our family needs Simon's help right now. If you fall out with him, how can our families continue working together? When Simon was with Maria, you told me to turn a blind eye. Now, why not ask Simon to do the same? He's a man, you're a woman. How is that the same? I couldn't believe those words came out of my mother's mouth. As a woman herself, in her subconscious, she already placed herself in a lower position. Actually, I had this premonition early on. No matter how educated or accomplished I became, it would never change their outdated thinking. I came back today with one last hope, hoping they might stand by my side. Now, seeing the answer with my own eyes, though it hurts, I can at least let go. I got up to leave. Behind me, my parents cursed at me. My dad said if I dared step out of that door today, they would no longer acknowledge me as their daughter. My mom said if I didn't reconcile with Simon, they wouldn't care whether I lived or died. Fine, don't care. They never considered if I'd even survive reconciling with Simon. Not long after leaving home, I got a call from Simon. He laughed triumphantly on the other end, asking if I still dared bring up divorce. I found it odd. Wouldn't a divorce benefit you more? Simon, whether it benefits me or not is none of your business. Just remember, you're mine alive or dead. Why? Simon, it's not just because you're my wife. Even if you were a dog I raised, no one else could have you. What if that person is stronger than you? Someone you can't afford to mess with. The other end went silent. Simon was probably stunned by my words. Then he quickly recovered. With you. You think you can hook up with someone stronger than me? Eva, I'm as high as you'll ever get. Really? Get your ass back here. Simon shouted before hanging up. In his mind, since even my parents wouldn't back me up, I must be at a dead end. So he called me back, thinking I wouldn't dare defy him. But I just wandered the streets slowly. Eventually, night fell, and the city started raining again. I looked up at the night sky, oblivious to the car that had quietly parked beside me, until James' voice came, enjoy getting soaked. I turned in surprise. It was the same car as last time. He still didn't have a driver. For a moment, I wondered if James was following me. Otherwise, how could we bump into each other in such a big city? I smiled at James. It's raining. Give me a ride, James. James, using me as a chauffeur again. Though his words were biting, he was kind-hearted. He let me in, saying he'd take me home. I thought about it. I don't have a home. Living with Simon didn't count. My parents' house, well, they had just disowned me. James was startled by my words, and frowned over at me. I sighed in feigned helplessness. This was all thanks to James. That night, I told you not to leave any traces, but you didn't listen. Now, look, they caught me red-handed, demanding I leave without a penny. James scoffed. Simon dares to leave you penniless. Why wouldn't he? Simon's family is thriving, and mine doesn't dare offend him. James' expression seemed to say, Simon's family is thriving. Are you mistaken? I forced a bitter smile. In his presence, Simon's family was indeed insignificant. But how could I compare with him? James, just drive around. I'll find a hotel. James casually agreed, but later, when I asked him to stop, it was like he went deaf all of a sudden. Where are you taking me? Afraid I'll sell you? Hardly. How much would I be worth? With James' wealth and power, he wouldn't dirty his hands for pocket change. But I couldn't understand why someone like him kept crossing paths with me, and in such intimate ways. James took me back to his villa. From the moment I got out of the car, I knew what he intended. There was a silent yet intense undercurrent between adults. I watched James back and suddenly felt a sense of familiarity. But when I opened my mouth to ask, his kiss landed. Just like that night, he had a wildness I couldn't endure. I wanted to escape, yet I inexplicably wanted to get closer. The rain outside grew heavier, and the temperature inside rose. This time, when I woke up, James was still by my side. He had just woken up too, eyes half open, lazily greeting me, morning. After a moment of silence, James was fully awake and slowly sat up. He asked me, "Got any plans today?" "No plans for now." "Then come with me to an interview. Our company is hiring. Give it a shot. Whether you get it or not, depends on you." James said it so casually, like he was just bored and had a random idea. But it was early in the morning. We had just woken up, our minds still foggy. If he hadn't thought of it beforehand, he wouldn't bring it up now. Plus, my parents and Simon always opposed me getting a job. I tried finding work before, but never passed an interview. I felt it was strange, so I asked around. After asking a few companies, someone subtly hinted at the reason. "Before looking for a job, discuss it with your family." I later asked my parents and Simon, they admitted it. One said a married woman should stay home and take care of the family. The other said he could afford to take care of me. They spoke with conviction, completely disregarding my feelings. Since then, I've been stuck at home. I knew, with them interfering, finding a decent job in this city was as hard as climbing a mountain. Unless I joined James's company, my parents and Simon couldn't reach James. On the contrary, they had to be respectful to James. I felt a bit excited and looked at James. "How did you know I wanted a job?" James smiled innocently. "You left with nothing. Don't find a job and you'll starve." He made a good point, but couldn't he be nicer about it? With such a handsome face, how did he say such harsh things? Simon only found out 3 months later that I worked at James's company. It was because I went with James to a gala. Someone recognized me there, took a photo of me and James, and sent it to him. Simon rushed over as the event ended, blocking my path. James, worried Simon might do something to me, pulled me behind him protectively. Simon got angrier, his hair practically standing on end. But since it was James standing in front of him, he didn't dare lash out. He just stared at me, gritted his teeth and asked, "The person you said is more powerful than me, the one I wouldn't dare provoke, is him." Me. That was just a random assumption. I never thought there would be anything between me and James. But now, whether I explain or not, Simon wouldn't believe me. And I didn't feel like explaining. I didn't care if he believed me or not. Seeing me remain silent, Simon turned to James, speaking each word slowly. "James, no matter how rich and powerful you are, you can't steal someone's wife. James, if I remember correctly, you cheated first. Simon, whether I cheat or not is between my wife and me. No matter what, you are an outsider. Is that so?" James smiled slightly, his tone particularly calm, yet it somehow carried a deadly vibe. Simon instantly wilted. You see, compared to his pride and male ego, his reputation didn't matter as much. He rushed over tonight not because he loved me, but because he saw that after I left him, I was still thriving, even flourishing under someone else's care. I had a job, dignity. I entered events he couldn't get into. Everyone was courteous to me, and the person standing beside me, he had to look up to. Those scenes he imagined where I would come crawling back never happened, and he couldn't handle it. Simon said, "Eva, we're still married, you're still my wife. I've filed a lawsuit." "What?" Simon was shocked. "You filed for divorce?" "Yes." "Why?" "I won't agree to it." "Why wouldn't you?" "Maria is pregnant. Don't you want to marry her?" Simon's expression went from shock to understanding, but looking at who was beside me, everything became clear. With James around, what information couldn't I get? Simon instantly deflated. After a while, he slowly asked, "If I break up with Maria, would you come back to me?" "No." Simon nodded, laughing at himself. "I see, you found better. Why would you look back at me?" I didn't refute him, but honestly, my separation from him had nothing to do with James. The seed of our breakup was planted the first time I caught him being intimate with Maria. James's presence just made it grow faster. Though Simon agreed to the divorce, he kept delaying the paperwork. He'd say today, then tomorrow, then the day after. In the meantime, he kept messaging me, saying what he thought were emotional things, and sending me gifts, which I returned unopened. Each time I returned one, he sent something more expensive next. Maybe Simon thought that as long as he threw money at it, I would come back. After all, he never treated me well before. Now that he was nice, I should be grateful, right? Until the court summons arrived. He called me, demanding why I was being so aggressive. I was at work, swamped with tasks. No time for his nonsense. I indifferently told him, if you genuinely want a peaceful divorce, let's set a date for the paperwork. If you want to take it to court, I'll be there too. No more unnecessary talks. Simon, furious. So that night I had the driver take you home. You didn't go home, but hooked up with James. That night, I forgot until you mentioned it. If you hadn't said let the driver take me home, I wouldn't have gotten into James's car by mistake. Eva, Simon said each word slowly over the phone. I could tell he was really pissed, but there was nothing he could do to me now. I didn't live in his house, didn't spend his money, and I didn't want to see him. He couldn't even see me if he wanted to. Of course, someone as shameless as Simon would try every trick in the book. He tried to get my parents to pressure me, but he didn't know my parents were trying to make amends with me and wouldn't dare cross me. I reminded Simon, Maria's belly is getting bigger by the day. If you keep dragging this out and piss her off, it'll be embarrassing for everyone. Simon, I've already told her, I don't want the child and I won't marry her. If she insists on having the baby, she can raise it by herself. I suddenly didn't know what to say. That was his first love. He wanted her so badly. Why not treasure her now that he had her? Maybe that's just how men are. When I was beside him, he hated me, despised me, and spoke to me harshly. Seeing me thrive with someone else made him furious, like his male ego was challenged, and he wanted to take me back. Is this love? No. He's inherently selfish, wants what he can't have, and gets mad when he loses it. Ideally, both Maria and I would stay messed up around him, and he'd have something better. Simon stalled until the day before the court date to finally agree to divorce. That day, work wasn't busy, so after the call, I hurried to take leave and rushed downstairs. In the car, I remembered I should tell James. Even though I had asked him not to get involved in my divorce, I still owed my progress to him. James hadn't put me in a cushy job where I'd do nothing. He found ways to train me, helping me quickly improve. He said relying on others is unreliable. You need to stand tall and straight yourself to have a comfortable life. James rarely talked about his family, but I knew there were rumors about us in the company. His parents had probably heard some of it too. His mom had approached me recently. She asked about my relationship with James. I said we were friends. She smiled, clearly not believing me. But James and I hadn't defined our relationship. Even after starting work, I rented my own place instead of staying with him. James never demanded anything from me. Whether at work or in life, he didn't act superior around me. He was wealthier and more powerful than Simon, but far more well-mannered. Sometimes I wondered to myself, is this love? Subtle, comforting, so much you want to sink into it. But I knew James's parents probably didn't have a good impression of me. If I wanted to be with James later, his parents would be a tough hurdle. Thinking of this, I deleted the message I was about to send. No rush. I would tell James after getting the divorce certificate, so that if Simon changed his mind, it wouldn't disappoint James and me. Simon didn't change his mind, but Maria suddenly showed up and caused a scene. You could tell Simon had pushed her to the edge. She was a mess, in a terrible state. Her belly looked 5 or 6 months along. Her tight-fitting clothes made it more obvious. She demanded Simon marry her right after the divorce. Simon refused. She threatened to kill herself. People gathered around. One look at Maria's belly, and they knew Simon had cheated. Now he was divorcing his wife, but didn't want to take responsibility for his mistress. All eyes on Simon made him feel embarrassed and furious. So, when Maria kept pestering him, he impatiently waved her away. But he misjudged his strength, and Maria fell. Some staff wanted to help her up, but seeing she was pregnant, they feared causing further trouble. The onlookers naturally didn't dare help either. Honestly, I felt a bit sorry for Maria in that moment. If she hadn't been with Simon, at least her life wouldn't be so humiliating. But sympathy is just sympathy. I wasn't going to play the saint and help her now. Maybe Simon's cruelty and the surrounding indifference drove her mad. Maria abruptly pulled a fruit knife from her bag and lunged at Simon. Simon couldn't dodge in time and got stabbed. Blood gushed out, sending people screaming and scattering. I was stunned. Simon, not fatally wounded, could still fight back and quickly regained his footing. He kicked Maria hard, sending her flying, her screams echoing through the Civil Affairs Bureau. Everyone was too shocked to breathe. So was I. When Simon and Maria were good, he shared everything with her. They were inseparable. Now he didn't want her. He didn't care about the child she carried. I dreaded to think if I hadn't met James, and Simon kept stalling the divorce, would he have driven me to death? After such chaos, we couldn't get the divorce certificate. Both Simon and Maria ended up in the hospital. I heard Simon's kick was so hard that Maria would probably lose the baby. She might even need her uterus removed. I returned to the office feeling utterly lost. Just as I stepped out of the elevator, James rushed up to me. "Are you okay?" He anxiously looked me up and down. Once he was sure I was fine, he sighed in relief. "Why didn't you tell me you were going to meet Simon?" he asked. "He called me out of the blue. I planned to tell you after I got the divorce papers." James looked stunned for a moment, then suddenly pulled me into a tight hug. Some employees passing by saw this and were so shocked their mouths hung open. I gently pushed James away. "People are watching." James said, "I shouldn't have let you do that." Originally, I had asked him not to interfere with my divorce from Simon. I had my own reasons and wanted to handle it myself. I wanted to stand beside him openly as a free person, but I didn't expect Simon and Maria to act so crazy. Not only did they drag it out for half a year, but today's fiasco was completely unexpected. James also seemed shaken. "What if Maria wasn't after Simon today, but after you? Going alone, weren't you afraid something might happen to you?" I hadn't thought that far. As soon as I heard Simon was willing to divorce amicably, I couldn't wait to sever ties with him. In that moment of excitement and eagerness, I didn't consider anything else. James was about to scold me, but seeing my guilty and pitiful expression, he just couldn't bring himself to do it. He simply said, "I'll have the lawyer handle everything with Simon. Other than necessary appearances, you're not to meet Simon again." Before I could respond, he added, "Not that you'll be able to meet him anyway. He almost killed Maria. Do you think she'll let him go?" From the way Maria took out that knife, it's clear her love for Simon has turned into hate. Or maybe there wasn't any pure love between them to begin with. One wanted what they couldn't have and was curious about having it. The other saw Simon had some money and wanted to live comfortably with him. With such selfish intentions, it was bound to end badly. On the day I got the divorce papers, James said he'd take me out to celebrate my newfound freedom. But all I wanted to know was why, when I got into the wrong car that night, he didn't explain. James said, "If I explained, wouldn't you have just gotten out? And you weren't worried I might be a bad person?" James replied, "I knew who you were. Do you think I'd just sleep with any stranger who gets into my car? Do I look that crazy?" No, he didn't seem crazy at all. He purposely watched me fall into the trap and didn't even try to pull me out. Instead, he jumped in with me. James told me he'd seen me long ago, back when my grandma was still alive. His grandma's house was next to my grandma's. Whenever he studied at home, he could see me tending to the flowers and plants in the garden. Grandma even had a swing made for me. When I got tired of gardening, I'd sit on the swing and sway, looking completely free and at ease. James couldn't understand why someone so bright and carefree would become so dull and despondent around Simon. When I asked him if he wanted to do it, it was like I cast a spell on him, and he lost control of his actions and words. Later, James finally realized that some feelings are planted in our youth. The moment we reunited was just the trigger for those feelings to erupt. After Simon went to jail, he wrote me a letter. He melodramatically expressed his regret and remorse. An unusual amount of genuine emotion seeped through his words. Honestly, I couldn't quite understand Simon's mindset. He knew there was no chance between us anymore. What was the point of writing that letter? Did he think James reading it would make him suspicious of me? In fact, after reading it, I didn't discard it immediately, but casually left it on the table. When James came home, he glanced at it and tossed it into the trash. He didn't ask, and I didn't explain. We carried on as if nothing had happened. Just like how my life with James is now. Gentle, peaceful, the way I always imagined marriage should be.